Join James from 4x4earth.com as he learns all there is to know about four-wheel driving, camping, fishing, and getting out and exploring our great country on the 4x4 Earth podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to be doing one. It's been a little while. There's been a thing called COVID. It's kind of got in the way, been keeping everyone either cooped up or really busy. I've been quite busy with COVID, but managed to get a little bit of time off, and so really excited to be talking to Robert Pepper, Australia's best four-wheel drive journalist. Today we're going to be talking about some really interesting vehicles that are either on the market or coming to Australia. We've got Jeep Gladiators, we've got Land Rover Defenders, and we've got the Ineos Grenadier. So let's jump into our conversation with Robert Pepper. Welcome to the podcast, Robert.
Thanks very much, James. Good to be back.
Yes. So it's been a little while since we've spoken, and there's a few new vehicles that are coming out into the market for those of us who are able to get out and actually go and buy a vehicle, which is neither of us, but hopefully not too much longer as we are stuck in our little COVID prisons. Probably worthwhile having a bit of a chat about some of them, though.
Yeah, look, there's a few interesting ones coming out. I think that probably the most anticipated one has been the new Land Rover Defender, which we have to call the L663 to differentiate it from the previous Defenders.
What do we know about that?
Well, now it's out, and the interesting thing is it's clearly a bit of a departure from the old Defender, because I think that the old Defender, the ethos there was you just take a one-ton box, put some wheels around it and an engine, and that would be your design principle. But now they had the chief designer during the covenant standing next to it, talking about the lines and the looks of it and so on. And if you look at the people that Land Rover Australia picked as the brand ambassadors, they're sort of lifestyle chefs and surfers and things like that. And then if you look at the sort of interior capacity of the vehicle, it's probably less space in the back than a Prado. So what the Defender was famous for was just having huge amounts of payload and room, and that's not really the case. And the payload's actually pretty good on it. So I don't quite think it's in that same sort of market as the old Defender was. I think it's really got a good niche though, and that's probably going to be one of the best tow cars on the market, if not the best one.
Oh, really? So enough power to be able to tow, unlike some other vehicles that are out there?
Yeah, it's got an 8-speed gearbox. It's got pretty decently powerful petrol and diesel engines. It's got a very short overhang. It's got air suspension, handles well. It's really got all of the ingredients needed to be an absolutely first-class tow vehicle. Plus, it's got a 3.5-ton rating, and you can actually tow 3.5 tons more since it's a GVM. In fact, the American version of it is rated to tow 3750 kilograms, so we actually get a down-rated version for Australia here. So I would say if you want a top-end tow car, be looking at the Defender as opposed to the 200. Now, I haven't towed the Defender, but I've towed with a lot of other Land Rovers, so I can't imagine this one's going to be anything less than outstanding.
The look of it, though, the design is a significant departure for Land Rover. Well, for Defenders, isn't it?
Well, yeah, look, it's not a significant departure for the Land Rover, because a lot of their vehicles tend to look the same. If you look at Evoque and the Velar and all the rest of it, it's all very, very similar, and the Defender's pretty similar to that again, but it's got significantly less boxy. And the reason for that is, of course, looks and to some extent aerodynamics. That's why the Discovery 5 has suddenly got the sort of tapered off back there, looks and aerodynamics. But it does impinge on road space, and that's a bit of an issue in my view for people like you and I.
From my point of view, it just looks like everything else, though. The Defender looked great. The old Defender. It was certainly out there. When someone was coming along in a Defender, you could certainly pick it. This looks like many other people's vehicles.
Yeah, look, I think it does, but fundamentally, do we really care about what it looks like? Do we not care about the performance? And, for me, I think it'll be a really great tow car. I don't think there's enough room in the back for my liking. That said, this is the 110. Now, Land Rover are rumoured strongly to be bringing out the 130. So that has always referred to the wheelbase of the vehicle, but actually Land Rover have changed it a bit now. So the 130, if it comes out, will actually have the same wheelbase as the 110, but it will just have a longer back. Now, if that's the case, if we can add an extra 200 mil, 250 mil to the back of it, that would be great, because then you've got lots of load space. And they can do that, because if you look at the 110 and the 90, the short wheelbase version, which you're also getting, then they've got exactly the same. They're exactly the same from the rear axle backwards. So that means the 110's got a really short overhang, and you could easily extend it out by another 200 mil, 250 mil, which is what I'm hoping they'll do for the 130, and then you're going to have a heap of load space. Now, I hope that when they do that, the GVM rises appropriately, so you still get the 900, 950 kilogram payload, which is what the car has at the moment, and that's actually a differentiator. But that, I think, then becomes more of a Defender as opposed to the 110 we've got at the moment.
So from the Defender to something that I don't think is in Australia yet, but will be coming out, the Ineos Grenadier.
Yeah, so Ineos, let me just back up a bit. So Jim Ratcliffe, who is a British billionaire in petrochemicals, was also a bit of an adventurer and an explorer. Really loved the Defender, so he was, not happy that Land Rover didn't make it. And when they stopped making it, he tried to buy the rights for them to continue it, and Land Rover didn't want to sell it, so he just went and built his own. And that's what the Ineos Defender is. So it actually looks very similar to the Defender, so much so that Land Rover just tried to sue Ineos for copyright infringement and managed to fail on the basis you can't really trademark a rectangle. That's kind of my view of it. But I'm kind of happy that they failed. And that, you look at it and you go, yes, that is a serious vehicle, because it's all boxy. It's square. There's none of these rounded edges, which are no good. I mean, one of the things I liked about my old Defender, my TD5, was that it had a squared bonnet, so you could put tools and rest a coffee cup on it, and it didn't just slide off. I liked that. I liked the fact that it was just completely square at the back, so there's no wasted space, It's got all of that. So the payload looks good. Apparently you can take a Euro pallet in the back for a wagon. That's pretty amazing. It's got live axles front and rear. Now, I'm not actually a massive fan of live axles. I think that's kind of old tech now, and vehicles are better off with fully independent suspension. But nevertheless, it's got live axles, and it's got cross-axle lockers front and rear, and it's all-wheel drive. It's got a modern engine and an 8-speed automatic-only gearbox. So that could well be the absolute vehicle of choice, provided they deliver on it and provided it's not massively costly. Oh, as in fact the new Defender is. The Defender is really expensive.
Oh, is it? Well, do you get a rough idea of the price for a Defender?
Oh, look, you can easily go above 100k on it, easily. So, and for a Defender, that's a lot of money. And yeah, I just can't really see people paying that, because it's a good car, but for four-wheel drivers, you buy the car and then you're looking at minimum 10, probably 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 to kit the thing out. And then that's a pretty expensive proposition. Now, the only people that regularly spend that sort of money are 79 series owners, but they're kind of the special breed. But I just can't see it. And the thing is, I don't think the aftermarket are really embracing the Defender. If you look at the new D-Max that's come out, ARB, Ironman, TJM, they're rushing out press releases saying, hey, we've got bull bars, we've got suspension, it's all here, come and buy it. With the Defender, crickets. No one's going, oh yeah, we've got a Defender in development, we want to develop this, that, and that. They're not. And then that creates a vicious circle, which is that people, or off-roaders, won't want to buy the car because there's no accessories for it. And if no one's buying a car for off-roading, no one's going to want to develop accessories for it. And this is exactly what we saw, back in 2005, 15 years ago, with the Discovery 3. Initially, it was like, yeah, nothing. All the accessories for the Discovery 2, nothing. So will it pick up and turn around? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I wouldn't necessarily bet on the car being massively supported by the aftermarket in the short term. I'm just not seeing that interest.
The Grenadier is going to have very low volumes, one would have thought.
Well, yes. I mean, that's the thing. The reason Land Rover gave up building the Defender was that they couldn't look, I mean, the thing just needed is fundamental re-architecting to meet modern safety and standards and all the rest of it. Right? But the volumes weren't just there enough. There's only selling that 25,000 a year into that market. And that, I believe, is why they have taken the Defender into a different direction. Now, you and I can say that we don't like where the Defender's gone. And I don't think it's really the sort of vehicle that it should be for off-road touring, right? But you and I are not responsible to the shareholders of Jaguar Land Rover. And if we were, then we would want to build a vehicle which appeals to a broad, in a profitable market. And I don't know that Land Rover see that the off-roading utilitarian market is one that they particularly want to play anymore. I think they're more into the lifestyle stuff. So Ineos squarely are targeting that market, and let's hope that they can find enough volume and profit in there to make a go of it.
Looks like a great vehicle. Do we have any idea what price is going to be like when it comes out here? No idea at all. There's zero pricing. Absolutely no idea. We can speculate and say what we'd like it to be priced at, but no, there's no idea. I'm thinking it's going to be moderately expensive, though. Well, look, I can't see it being Chinese cheap at all. I just can't see it. But I think it really depends, how much of a loss leader they want to take on it. They've got to balance profit per unit with units sold, so they could sell it at a high price, sell very few units, high profit per unit, sell it at a low price, very little profit, and sell lots of units. I personally think that they'd probably be better off just selling it at a relatively low profit, because the people that buy these sort of cars would want to be spending minimal money on it, and the more it gets out there, the more it's likely to sell, and then you've got aftermarket, new versions, and all the rest of it. But look, who's to know? I haven't done I haven't seen their business plan, so I'm just guessing here. What about the Jeep Gladiator? What are your thoughts on that? Well, it's fundamentally crippled because it just doesn't really have much of a payload, and for a big ute like that, and it's got a long wheelbase, if you can't put much stuff in it, kind of what's the point, really? It's the payload's hardly anything. I forget the exact number. I think it's under 700 kilograms. And, what would you do with that little payload? But it looks great. And, it's capable off-road, even though it's got a very long wheelbase. That's kind of my view. So if you don't want to carry very much... So I think it looks epic, but I do like my Jeeps. Why would they have designed it with such a small payload? Well, Americans do that, and I don't really know why, because I've noticed with all the big American trucks, the Rams and the Silverados and things like that, they've all got really great towing capacities. But you look at the payload and it's like, what, really? Hang on, that figure must be wrong. So Americans just build stuff with small payloads. I don't know why. It's just a thing. It's what they do, and it's carried it over. I mean, the Jeeps have never had a great payloads, particularly the Wrangler, and now we see the same thing with the Gladiator. Now, with a Wrangler, you can kind of forgive it. When you've got a Gladiator, which is a ute, and it's got that massive sort of bed there, well, you need a bit more payload. So what are the design factors then that go into sort of, that comes out in the payload? What is it that they've traded off for a small payload? Oh, look, there could be any number of things. So, look, the payload on it's about 700 kilograms, which, it's really low for a ute. And particularly, obviously, once you start putting accessories on, that's a problem, and that will likely ease you right into it. But the maximum payload there's a whole bunch of things which actually limit it. It could be any one of them. So let's take Ranger Raptor, for example. That's based on the Ranger. As we know, it's got a reinforced chassis, all sorts of things there, but it's got a much lower payload due to the rear axle load rating than the Ranger. So interestingly, on the Ranger Raptor, the front axle loading maximum load is greater than the Ranger, but the Ranger's rear axle load is way greater than that as a Raptor. Now, the reason for that is that it's got a relatively soft set of coil springs in the back, and that is what is limiting its payload and also its towing ability, which is limited by the towable mass because of those soft springs. Basically, if you put load in it starts to move the shock turn of the ride zone. So that's the limitation there. Now,
I don't know if that's something similar with the Gladiator or not. It could be, I don't know, it could be that the GVM is low because I find it hard to believe the brakes are up to it. Could it be the cooling system? I know that they had to do some work with the cooling system to get it to tow 3.5 tons. So, yeah, don't know. It could be any number of factors.
And I wonder if it's the kind of four-wheel driving that they do. Maybe they do less camping and less... There's plenty in the United States. You've got plenty of choices. If you want to tow, then you could go for a Ram or an F250 or something, which is probably where you'd want to go, although I don't know what they're like off-road. And so the Jeep is really...
Yeah, look, I think that's an astute observation. So, yeah, Americans tend not to do the sort of trips we do, which is load the car up and then just drive over the Simpson or across Googs Track or whatever else. They tend to do a lot of shorter range trips, which is why that they're running Wranglers on 35s and 37s and had a lot of short wheelbase vehicles there in petrols, right? So because of that, maybe they just don't need the payload we need. I mean, what I've seen that they do is they actually trailer some vehicles out to the start of the trail and drive the trail and come back again. Whereas we don't do that. We just drive all the way there. So it's a very different type of full driving. And I think that's probably about it. But yeah, if you look at the specs on it, the payload on the Gladiator is around about the 600, 650 kilo mark. Towing is 2,700. Now, those are not great figures at all. Oh, and the other thing is safety. It inherits the same poor... We expect cars to be 5-star safety rated, and I'm not sure what the Gladiator will come in at, possibly 1 star, possibly 2 or 3, depending how much text they put into it. But I can't see it being 5-star like everything else, every other ute on the market.
And that's going to be another significant failing for it, isn't it?
Oh, for me, I would not buy... I love the Wrangler. I'd love one, but I'm not going to buy a brand new car when you've got a significantly higher chance of death or injury in the event of a crash. Why would you do that? I mean, do you not love your family?
Well, it is complicated with the way that the star system comes out. And is it death and injury to the occupants of the vehicle, or is it the likelihood of inflict injury? Not really that they should be different things, but what are the kind of things that it's going to miss out on, do you know, that are going to cost it so many stars?
That's a really good point, because the ANCAP, look, we should probably do another podcast on the failings of the ANCAP system here. So here's the thing. In principle, the ANCAP system is great, and I fully support it. We should have safety ratings, and they've done amazing work driving up the safety of vehicles. However, the problem with that is it's become a little bit too complicated, because now there's all sorts of different safety ratings, sort of sub-safety ratings there. There's the basic crashworthiness of the vehicle, which is one thing, and then there's also a factor there, pedestrian friendliness, and then preventative safety, and all sorts of other things. So what I'd like to see happen with the NCAP safety rating is it to be basically split into 3 different types, or at least 3 different types. And all right, here is the basic crashworthiness of the vehicle, that's one. Here is the sort of family safeness of it. Here's the pedestrian or safety for other people, etc. Because if you live out in the country and you're just driving around a country hole, you don't care about pedestrian friendliness. It's not important to you, but it would be important to you if you drive in the city. So let's fix that. And again, if you're looking to buy a vehicle that's safe for your family, you want things like the fact that the curtain airbags extend all the way into the second row, for example, and it's got ISOFIX child seats. So, you've got to rate the vehicle higher than that. But if it's a 2-door vehicle, or you don't have kids, or your kids are growing up, you don't care about that. So I think that you really got to look at the ANCAP ratings and pick and choose what's important to your use case and what you care about there. And at the moment, it's all bundled up into one rating, which doesn't allow you to do that. But coming back to the point, which is that the ANCAP rating itself is basically made up of the basic crashworthiness of a vehicle. Now, you slam it into your poles and your blocks of metal and see what happens to the crash test dummies, and that's good. But then there's a whole bunch of technology you can add onto it, which improves the crash rating, such as autonomous emergency braking, pedestrian detection, a whole bunch of other things like that. And I'd like to see a differentiator between the basic crashworthiness of the vehicle and all the technology add-on. And where the Jeep Wrangler and Gladiator falling down is the basic crashworthiness. When you slam them into a block of metal, their ratings, if you dig into the detail, are not as good as the other cars, and that's why they're not 5-star. And no amount of technology you're going to throw onto that vehicle is going to change that fact.
It's really quite sad, isn't it? Because they do look awesome. Having said that, you'd want to be able to take a little bit more kit with you. So what is the issue then? With such a small payload, what is the problem then if you go over that payload?
Well, so the payload's around at 650 kilograms, and that's going to disappear incredibly quickly. And when you run it over the payload limit, here's what happens. Number one is that your warranty may be possibly disclaimed because you are operating the vehicle outside of limits. You come in there to go, okay, you've got this, and this. Yeah, you're operating outside. I mean, look, if you operate any machine outside of its stated operating limits, how can you expect the manufacturer to stand behind it? It's not fair reason, right? That's one. Number two, insurance. You are required to operate your vehicle in compliance with the law at all times. Now, if you drive around an overloaded vehicle, then that's a problem. Now, it's not a problem for every single type of claim because insurance companies, and have been taken through the ombudsman for this. The nature of the, non-compliance with the policy has to be pertinent to the claim. So, for example, if you had an overloaded vehicle and it got damaged in a hailstorm, well, the insurance company would have to pay out because the fact it was overloaded, nothing to do with the fact it was hail damaged. But if you have a crash and an overweight vehicle, then I would suggest that in just about any crash, a fairly good case could be made that the extra weight or the overweight of the vehicle contributed towards the crash because the heavier a vehicle is, the longer it takes to stop, the less maneuverable it is, etc., etc. So that's problem number two. And problem number three is lack of reliability. If you overload a vehicle, the transmission works harder, the engine cooling has to work harder, everything about it has to work with design loads. It didn't happen, so you're going to have reliability issues there. So those are your three problems with overloading your vehicle.
And the payload includes passengers, doesn't it?
Yeah, the payload is literally everything. So passengers, anything you add to the car, your bull bar, your roof rack, driving lights, and it all adds up. Because this doesn't add up. Well, it does. UHF radio, that's a couple of kilos here. You put wiring in there. And people obviously think of the bull bar and the winch. Yeah, that's a big, heavy item. The snorkel does not weigh nothing. It's another 2 or 3 kilos. Going, well, 2 or 3 kilos here, what does it matter? Well, it adds up. You put heavy-duty rubber mats in there. You add your UHF antenna. You add wiring for your battery. Second battery. How heavy is a battery? That's a significant percentage as well. But there's also insidious things as well. So, for example, if you decided to swap out the tyres and go 33-inch tyres or bits wide or whatever else there, then you'll find that those tyres actually weigh more than the OEMs. And same sort of deal for the suspension. You're going to just lift it by 2 inches. Well, those 4 coils you're going to put in will be taller and heavier than the OEM coils. It's the same for the shocks. And you're going to add underbody protection. So pretty much everything you do to a four-wheel drive adds weight to it, and that comes out of the payload. Now, how much does a family of 4 weigh? Do you know how much the average Australian adult weighs? Take a guess.
It'll be probably 80, 85 kilos, I would have thought.
Yeah, exactly, and that's naked, right? So if we add in an extra 5 kilos of clothes, that's 90, so that's 180 kilograms, okay, for 2 people. So let's add in mum and dad in the back, so that's 180 there, and let's add in an extra 50, so up to 280 kilograms there, and we've only got, about 650 to play with, so just by 4 people, you've got a lot of stuff in there already. And then you put a 60-litre fridge in the back with a fridge slide and a drop slide, and, well, that's about it. Then you've got to look at the towable mass. You're going to tow a camper trailer. That's 150 kilograms. Goodbye, payload. It's all gone. Look, payload is a problem for modern vehicles because we just want to take so much stuff. It's so heavy. And, my view is that you need 900 to 1,000 kilograms, which is why GVM uploads are so popular. But with the Jeep Wrangler, Jeep Gladiator starting around 650, yeah, it's just a non-starter for me. That and the payload, it's not going to happen. Yeah,
so 620 and, a bull bar, you don't have a lot to play with, do you?
No, you do not have a lot to play with. So, yeah, great-looking vehicle, but needs another 400 kilograms worth of payload. You can kind of forgive the Ranger Raptor for having a low payload because it's not designed to be load-lugging and forward off with the Ranger instead. The Raptor's designed to be this high-speed, buggy, and I get that, and I love what it can do there. So that's kind of forgivable. But the Gladiator, it's literally meant to be a working truck, and it can't work. Why would you?
How successful has the Ranger Raptor been?
I don't think it's as been. I don't know, because the only people that can really say that are the Ford bosses who signed off on it and whether it met their targets or not. It certainly hasn't completely sold out, because you see lots of them sitting at dealers, and people are getting pretty reasonable deals on them. And also Ford just brought out the, what's it called, FX4 Sport or something like that. It's basically a Ranger, but they put Fox suspension on it, and they put slightly taller tyres, and it's kind of a little bit between a wild track and a Raptor. So I guess they may not have done that if the Raptor was selling all that well. For me, I think that the Raptor needs two things. It needs another 100 kilowatts of power, because it's just underpowered for a sport truck. For a sporting vehicle, you want power, and it just doesn't have power. And then the second thing it needs is a better payload. Now, if you do that, you would compromise its ability to fly through the air, and I know that, and I accept that, and I personally would be willing to make that trade-off and go, you know what, I will have a stiffer suspension which doesn't allow me to successfully fly a metre in the air, in return for having a greater payload I can actually do something with. So that would be my two fixes I'd make to the Raptor, and then I think it would be an incredible vehicle. In fact, it is an incredible vehicle now, but I think it would be a more usefully incredible vehicle.
So Toyota has bought out a new Hilux. What are your thoughts on that?
It's not new. It's kind of just an incremental upgrade there, and they've just squeezed out a little bit more towing capacity. So the previous model it was 3.5 ton towing only for the manual, but now they're dropping the manual. They've upped the auto towing capacity, so they're really squeezing that out there. Yeah, look, the Hilux is a great car. They're just a bit of a refresh there. I don't quite think it's good enough to sort of have its market-leading position. But yeah, it's good to see Toyota still refreshing it and improving it.
They kind of, I don't know, from my point of view, they lack a bit of pizzazz.
Yeah, they do. That's because it's such a known name. It's so familiar and everything. So yeah, and in the interior, it's not, super class leading. Ford have done really well with their Sync, for example. Toyota don't have anything quite as good as that. And there's not much you can point at the Hilux and go, yes, it is the best at X, Y, or Z. It's sort of pretty good in a known, reliable name all the way around, really. And I think a lot of it is just buying on familiarity.
We'll leave it there, our interview with Robert Pepper. I'll leave a link in the show notes to some of Robert's great writing that he's been doing. And next week, we're going to talk utes. So some really interesting utes that are coming onto the market. We're going to have a chat with Robert about which one he would buy and the pros and cons of some of the ones that are coming out. Don't forget to check out the website, 4x4earth.com. Been really interesting over COVID. I would have thought that the numbers would have dropped off. Lots of people going there. Hundreds of thousands of people every month go to 4x4earth.com, Australia's largest free and independent four-wheel drive website. So if you're not a member, sign up. It's completely free, and tell us about your four-wheel drive. I would love to meet you out on the tracks one day. One day when I'm not in complete lockdown. That would be great.
4x4earth.com is used by over 200,000 people every month to find great tracks, organise trips, and find out how to better enjoy exploring the great outdoors. There's over 1,000 tracks and 300 campsites ready for you to explore. So check out 4x4earth.com today and sign up to get access to the track information, ask questions, and meet other 4x4 Earthers. Membership is completely free. If you're looking for a good route, check out 4x4earth.com today.